Okay, hi you beautiful New Zealanders. Well, we're in a series talking about how New Zealand is inching towards tribal rule, and there's no doubt New Zealand is slowly creeping towards Maori being in total control of our country. Every area of our society has been affected. You'll see this and you know about this. So New Zealand is now a two-tier nation. Today's video is number 5 in a series. If you have not seen the other 4 videos, I strongly suggest you do. Watching the previous 4 will make this video number 5 make more sense, okay? So, how did this happen? How did we become a two-tier nation? How did Maori have all these privileges and become a first-class group in this country? Well, we said that it has happened slowly over time. In the last video, video 4, I alluded to the fable called The Camel in the Tent and explained how this was relevant to help explain the birth and growth of our two-tiered nation. In answer to the question, how did we get here, we have looked at New Zealand legislation, important laws and court cases as one reason. And there are 6 pieces of legislation which have been passed which have enabled Maori to become first-class citizens. The first was the 1974 Maori Affairs Amendment Act, that was video 2. The second was the 1975 Treaty of Waitangi Act, video 3. The 1985 Treaty of Waitangi Amendment Act, video 4. And today we're going to be looking at the State-Owned Enterprises case. And then there was number 5, which was the 2004 Foreshore and Seabed Act, and number 6 was the 2011 Marine and Coastal Areas Act. Now we're going to have a look at 5 and 6 in another video. Alright, so how did the idea of partnership, how it was birthed? In today's video we're going to deep dive into what's known as the 1987 State-Owned Enterprises case. It was from this case, this court hearing, that the disastrous and wrong idea that the treaty is a partnership first sprang up. I'm going to explain how this happened. This was a court case between the National Maori Council and the government in 1987. The court had to answer one simple question. What principles of the treaty, if any, can be drawn from the document, that is the treaty, which are relevant to race relations in a contemporary New Zealand? Pretty simple, isn't it? Yeah. You'll remember that the idea of principles in the treaty first appeared in 1975 in the Treaty of Waitangi Act, but the problem was they'd never been defined, which is why we have this 1987 court case. A document summarizing what went on in that court case runs to 77 pages, and there's the reference. So enter this guy called Justice Anthony Willey. Hugely important. He's a judge, okay? Justice Anthony Willey has produced a brilliant summary of this document, the 77-page document that was written about this court case. Notice he's a judge. He knows what to look for, and he knows legal speak like no other. I have summarized Justice Anthony Willey's summary, which is as follows. So he did a summary of the court case, and I've done a summary of his summary. See how it works? So here we go. There were 5 judges in the case. This guy was the chief judge. His name was Robin Cook. It was Cook who mentioned the word partnership in his judgment. This is what he actually said. Quote, "The treaty is an enduring relationship of a fiduciary nature, akin to a partnership, each party accepting a positive duty to act in good faith, fairly, reasonably, and honourably towards the other." And there's the reference where I get this from. Okay, so I'm going to talk more about this quote in a moment. This is a key word, none. Watch this. Each of the 5 judges gave an individual judgment on what they thought the principles of the treaty should be. Now this is the crucial bit, and I quote Judge Willey. He says, quote, "None of the 5 judges held that it is a principle of the treaty that on its signing in 1840, a partnership came into existence between Queen Victoria and the Maori inhabitants of New Zealand." Oh my goodness. Just read that again. Did you read that? None of the 5 judges said that a partnership came into existence between Queen Victoria and the Maori inhabitants of New Zealand in 1840. This is so huge. Well done, Justice Willey. We're totally with you on this. So, I will quote Judge Willey's summary of the State-Owned Enterprises case in full here. He says, "It is therefore clear beyond any doubt that the case is not authority for the proposition that a partnership as understood in our common law exists between the Crown and Parliament and some innominate group of people of Maori extraction." Notice he says, beyond any doubt. When you look at this State-Owned Enterprises case in 1987 and what the judges actually said, it's beyond doubt. Shorn of this blatant misreading of the case, i.e. the State-Owned Enterprises case, the activists are left with only their wish list of wanting to share in the governance of New Zealand. See, they just made it up. This is just a myth. Given that these claims of partnership are devoid of principle, common sense, or any legal basis, in other words, there's no legal basis whatsoever for saying that the treaty is a partnership, it is beyond time that our parliamentarians stop pandering to such blatant self-serving nonsense. So he calls it nonsense. It is clear that David Seymour's bill, in whatever form it finally emerges, will go a long way towards putting an end to this racially divisive nonsense. He calls it nonsense. It is deserving of the wholehearted support of the coalition government. If that results in a round of buttock bearing and threats, then so be it. Yeah, I agree with him. So, how should we conclude about the idea of the treaty being a partnership between Crown and Maori? Let's go back to what Cook actually said. The treaty is an enduring relationship of a fiduciary nature akin to a partnership, each party accepting a positive duty to act in good faith, fairly, reasonably, and honourably towards the other. There were 5 judges. Were these 5 judges stupid? Think about this. 5 judges pored over the treaty. They were fully aware that in Article 1 of the treaty, Maori ceded sovereignty to the British completely and forever. That's what Article 1 says. Completely means completely. Britain had no partner. Maori chiefs gave Britain complete control of the country. This is what ceding sovereignty means. It is therefore impossible for Britain to be sovereign and at the same time be in partnership with a group of its subjects. Either Britain is sovereign or it is not. Concepts of sovereignty and partnership are mutually exclusive. You can have one or the other, but not both at the same time. To do so would be an oxymoron. Did the 5 judges not know this? Yes, they did. So when Cook said the treaty was akin to a partnership, he was definitely not meaning that Maori and the Crown were in a partnership arrangement. He could not possibly have meant that, because he knew the treaty. He was not stupid. He was not treaty ignorant. They had the treaty right in front of them, all those 5 judges. David Longy agrees. David Longy said this: did Queen Victoria for a moment think of forming a partnership with a number of signatures, a number of thumbprints, and 500 people? Queen Victoria was not that sort of person. We can have a democratic form of government or we can have indigenous sovereignty. They can't coexist and we can't have them both. And there's the reference. Delusional. So how do we explain how Maori activists believe the treaty is a partnership? In short, they're just delusional. Now, the dictionary defines delusional in this way: holding false beliefs or judgments about external reality that are held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, typically as a symptom of a mental condition. Oh my goodness. How the lie spreads. What has happened is that activist Maori jumped onto Cook's mention of the word partnership and milked it for all it's worth, and no one pulled them up. Can you believe that? In 1987, Maori activists so badly wanted to believe that the treaty was an actual 50-50 partnership between the Crown and Maori that they began to believe it was. So much did they believe it that other fools like John Key began to believe it too. And now John Key is mentoring Chris Luxon. Luxon also has come to believe this lie, and because Luxon is the Prime Minister, all his ministers are required to be in sync with him and think like him. And so the lie has spread like wildfire inside the National Party. There you go. Okay, back to the purpose of the video series. I wanted to show you how Maori privilege started and our 2-tier society started and how both have ballooned out of control. The idea of partnership is key to understanding what has happened. How so? Well, if Maori think Maori and the Crown are in actual partnership, then this explains why many Maori now think that the assets, resources of New Zealand, e.g. beaches, coastline, rivers, mountains, minerals, fisheries, etc., are all owned 50-50 with Maori. This in turn has led to the idea that any revenue from these assets must be split 50-50. See how privilege can come about? Many Maori have come to think that whatever Maori want, the Crown must supply, like separate health authorities, separate prisons, separate legal systems, separate schools, separate housing areas, special funding to promote and expand the use of Maori language in New Zealand, special entry to medical and engineering school, paying for Maori dance festivals, and so on. And because many MPs now wrongly think that the treaty is a partnership, they feel obliged to appease Maori at every turn. You see it everywhere. These MPs that we have now are appeasing Maori at every turn. Hey, we have to look after our partners, they say. Well, here's one right here. Here's Erica Sanford. Listen to her.
What role should iwi play in setting our migration settings in the years to come?
Well, a huge role. I mean, they're a treaty partner, right? And so they have a say in that. And I work really closely with the Māori members of my caucus and also the special interest group, the Māori special interest group that sit within the National Party around this. And certainly any policy that we come up with needs to be consulted on with iwi as well.
So there's Erica Sanford. She's Minister of Education and Immigration. She's got 2 very powerful portfolios. And she's a believer in this idea of partnership wrongly. How does she get it so wrong? Well, now look at our Prime Minister. See what he says. He's even worse.
Treaty was making sure there was a relationship between Crown and iwi. It's treated as akin to a partnership, whether it's formally defined as such, doesn't really matter. It is essentially a partnership. And what that has actually meant and what each party's obligations to each other are is what we've been working through as a country over the last 180 or so years. And we will continue to work through. And that's why Waitangi is so important, because it is an opportunity where there'll be further discourse, debate, discussion, challenge, provocation, and that's all good.
Oh my goodness, Chris is so lost and is so bluffing his way through that interview. He does not have a clue. Seriously. So here's the kicker and the conclusion. At the centre of Maori privilege, and one of the chief reasons why Maori privilege exists today is and our two-tier society, is this wrong idea that the treaty is a partnership. And here is the kicker. In most partnerships, both parties pay the bills. Not with Maori. We pay the bills. But Maori get all the benefits? What do we as non-Maori get from this partnership? The answer is absolutely nothing. We pay all the bills, Maori get all the benefits. So I'm going to finish with this. This, in short, is how we've come to be living in a two-tier society, with Maori now living as first-class citizens and the rest of us second class. Were you aware that most councils in New Zealand have signed up to be partners with their local iwi? That is to say, a large chunk of your rates are being gifted each year to local Maori. Did you know that? Okay, well, listen to Michael Laws, because very few people know about this, but it's happened. So let's listen to Michael.
All right, now, listen, earlier in this week, I said that I had engaged the Official Information Act to find out funding that seemed to me to be secretive and hidden in respect to local government authorities in New Zealand. And in the wake of the exposure of Meridian's, which is 51% owned by us, Meridian Energy's payoff of various groups that they were concerned would protest against them, and including 3 local runaka or iwi groups in the Waitaki area to do with regaining their consents for Lakes Benmore, Avemore, Waitaki, and I think Ohau as well, or the Ohau hydroelectricity scheme. I decided to ask the same question of my local council. Now, I've been on my local council this is my 8th year, yeah. And so each year I have gone through a process called long-term or annual plans, which is where you get a breakdown of the funding that is applied by your council to whatever it might be. And then as a result of that, you strike the rates. And for some people this year, they got astronomical, particularly in the Queenstown area and the Wanaka area, astronomical rate increases up to 40 or 50%. And during the annual and long-term process, I became increasingly concerned that I wasn't receiving the kind of financial information that I needed to be able to make an appropriate decision. And I raise this issue every time, and I never get a suitable response. So I've been voting against, as you might have guessed, the annual or long-term plans for quite a while now, and have been usually a voice in the wilderness, but I have to say a couple of other councillors have joined me in uttering similar thoughts. So as an elected member, I don't know what the answers to these questions are. So I utilised the Official Information Act, or the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, I think it's called, but it's basically the OIA set up for local government. And I asked some questions to do with the extent of funding of my council, the Otago Regional Council, to local iwi authorities, because there was nothing in any of the information that was publicly available, or even to me as an elected member, that itemised that. And the reason why I asked was because the Otago Regional Council, like many other councils in New Zealand, believes that it's in a treaty or a taitariti partnership with local Maori, which is nonsense, of course, and I have railed about it. But what I wanted to work out was what are the practical financial costs, if any, of being in a partnership with local Maori. Okay, so, and I thought, well, that's a fair question to ask. The Otago Regional Council says it's now a treaty partner, even though it's not the Crown or its representative, with local mana whenua. And the local mana whenua, which is just the name for the local iwi or Maori people who live in the area, but it's not all Maori people. So be very, very clear about this. It's only the local iwi that asks or tells you that that's their region. And for my area, that's Ngāi Tahu, all right? And the Ngāi Tahu tribe. And they have, set themselves up into a commercial entity. And I thought, that's really interesting. I wonder why they set themselves up into a commercial entity. I must go and have a look at that. And I have done. Anyhow, the question I asked, and it's a question that every elected member in New Zealand should be asking, is this. If you are entering a treaty relationship or partnership with your local mana whenua or your local Maori iwi, I'm assuming that this is a partnership of equals, right? So here we go. And that means that the local iwi, particularly if they're commercially well endowed like Ngāi Tahu, will be putting some money into that relationship, and so will you, the elected bodies, and you'll basically be covering each other's own expenses, right? Or your own expenses and how that partnership works. What I found was that from 2020 to 2024, so over the financial years, 2020 to 2024, so it's 4 financial years, $3.5 million had been paid by the ORC to iwi authorities, $3.5 million. And in addition to that, another $3.4 million, 3.5, my apologies, it's 3.5. I better get the statistics right. To be exact, it's $3,484,724 had been paid for contracts that had been entered into between the Otago Regional Council and iwi authorities. And then that was the last 4 financial years, $3.48 million, that in actual fact, the ORC was currently involved in contracts totaling almost $1.8 million for this financial year. So you add the 3.4 or 3.5, I guess is the nearest, and you add the 1.8 and you get to $5.3 million is the cost to the Otago Regional Council ratepayer for being in a partnership with local iwi. Now here's the question. 1, where would you find that information if you didn't find it via Michael Laws and the Local Government Official Information Act request? Answer, you wouldn't. It's in no publication the Otago Regional Council put out. It's not in their annual plan information. They don't consult on it with their community, so it's in no consultation documents. It's not even in their annual report at the end of the year in which they're telling you how they've spent their money. They can tell you, for example, how much money they've given to Michael Laws for my expenses, as in driving down to Dunedin or flying somewhere on ORC business, but they can't tell you they spent $5.3 million on basically providing an economic wherewithal to local iwi groups who, unsurprisingly, have commercialised themselves in a commercial company and have negotiated these contracts with the Otago Regional Council. There isn't anything that they do that's of any great value, I have to say. It's just, it seems, some form of exorbitant koha that is paid from the Otago Regional Council to a very, very, very small group of Maori individuals and their corporate structure. Now, the Otago Regional Council doesn't have a lot of Maori in it. In fact, I would suggest you possibly that there are more Pacific Islanders or Filipinos that work in the regional boundaries than Maori as a population, but I stand to be corrected. But certainly in the Queenstown, Wanaka area or the Dunstan area that I represent, that would literally be true. But the other thing that, of course, is true is if that is Otago, which has very few Maori in it at all, and it's costing $5.4 million to enter into a partnership arrangement with local mana whenua, then start duplicating that across all of the regional, city and district councils of this country. And as I said, I have put already in local government information requests for every council in New Zealand to see what that total sum of money will be. But partnership isn't where you pay people ever. You pay a group of people based upon the colour of their skin and the culture that they represent, a sum of money just for being that culture or that particular ethnicity. I wouldn't have thought so. And partnership is, we enter a partnership talking about stuff, working through stuff. It isn't where I give you money. That's almost like I'm giving these people pocket money. except it's $5.4 million, and you can do with it what you like. But here's $5.4 million just for the privilege of talking to you. That seems inordinately odd to me. But the worst part about this is how secret it is and how this information is kept from both the public and from media and even from elected officials in this country. Sometimes you've got to ask the right question, but you shouldn't have to. I thought local government was meant to be transparent, open and accountable. Well, you'd have to say on this issue, it is none of those things. All right?
Wow. Wasn't that absolutely eye-opening? Thank you, Michael, for actually taking the trouble to go and dig deep to bring stuff out for New Zealanders. It's absolutely awesome work. Okay, what's most upsetting about what Michael said is that the mandate to be in, quote, a partnership with Maori is not in the treaty. Did you? That's what this whole video is about. In other words, we're being conned. We're being ripped off. We're being shafted. We're being diddled. Whatever word you want to use, that's what's happening. Okay, thanks for watching. Please like, share, and comment on this video. See you next time.